Hey friends, so this is going to be probably a short video, but somebody asked me to do a video on the biggest mistakes that I made when I was writing my first novel. And for those of you who don't know, my first novel was Terra Titan, and it was the beginning of the 10-book Titan series. I have a continuation series. I have a standalone novel in that world. It is a story that I love. It is very dear to my heart, and I wrote it in 2018. The summer of 2018 was when I finished it, and it was awesome. It was so fun to write, and it was such a fun book, and I often look back at it now and cringe, because that's sort of how it goes with anything that you improve in, any sort of skill that you grow and develop in. You're just going to have this sense of like, man, it's just not as good as I hoped it would be. But that's also a false perception, right? And this video is about the biggest mistakes that I made while writing it. But if I'm being like completely 100% transparent, the biggest mistake that I made is I used too many exclamation points. And honestly, that's kind of it. Because I was writing at the peak of my ability at that time, right? The absolute peak. I've since gotten much better, and that's going to be the way it goes for everything that I write. You know, the story that I was writing this morning, I'm going to finish and I'm going to be like, man, this is the best thing I've ever written. And then in 3 years, I'm going to look back and cringe slightly because I'm going to have gotten better as a writer. And so I did make mistakes with Terra Titan, and it's not my best book, but it's also okay for it not to be my best book. It's okay, because it launched my career. Like, no joke. If I had been really concerned with not making any mistakes in that book, and I had, written it and rewritten it and rewritten it and rewritten it, I probably wouldn't have the career that I do. Instead, you know what I did? I said, this is as good as I can do, cool. And then I shipped it. I published it, and all of a sudden, other people started finding it and going, oh man, this is the kind of story that I love. I really enjoy what you've done with this world, with these characters. This is inspiring to me. I love this. And then they followed me as I continued to improve as a writer and release more books until the Titan series was done. And I've since written, 40 books, right? More than 40 books, but 40 some books that are probably all better than Terra Titan. But I think that sometimes we forget that readers don't care as much as we do. When you are on the writing side, craft is super important. When you're on the writing side, making sure the plot is perfect is really important. Making sure the pacing is exactly where it needs to be is really important. When you're on the reading side, if you can tell that somebody has poured a tremendous amount of passion into what they've created, then you're going to have grace for them. You're going to say, it's not perfect, but that's okay, right? Because that adds to the reading experience. And so I think a lot of times when we think about the biggest mistakes, right, it's actually not super helpful. It's much more helpful to just commit ourselves to finishing the story. It's much more helpful to commit ourselves to just writing the book and letting it be what it is. Now, that said, I do think that I made some mistakes. I do think that there were some things that I shouldn't have done. So one thing is that I tried to define my story before I wrote it. And I know that there's a spectrum here, right? From pantsers, which I'm very much a pantser, to plotters on the other side. And this spectrum ends up sort of defining how you're going to go about structuring your story and telling your story, right? And I'm very much on the pantser side. But even on the plotter side, I think this is a danger. When we sit down to tell a story, if we have completely locked into our heads what the story is about, what it means, every important detail, and we don't give ourselves any room to play inside of the manuscript as we are writing, what we produce will almost always be stilted. It'll be stiff. And it's not going to make for as smooth of a reading experience. And when I went back and I've read, Nova Terra Titan again, one of the things that I noticed about it is that I had a very, very clear sense of what I was trying to achieve. But because I had such a clear sense of what I was trying to achieve, I actually ended up hampering myself. And there were a number of different points where if I was writing the novel today, I would have gone off and explored a really, really interesting concept or a really interesting twist or a really interesting pivot in pacing or in character or in any of those things, right? But instead, I was just trying to shoehorn my characters into a specific story. And so I think that was probably the biggest thing, the biggest mistake that I made, the biggest thing that I wish I could maybe go back and change. I did actually go back and change how many exclamation points there were because I had way too many exclamation points. The other thing that I think that I did that was a mistake is that I talked to too many people about it. And this is actually a mistake that I made in the first couple of novels. Talking to people about your story is great. That's fine. The problem is that when you talk to people about your story, the more people you tell about it, the less likely you are to write it, the longer it's going to take to write. And this was something that I discovered because I ran across this really interesting fact about humans, which is that our brains reward us the same for talking about something as they do for actually doing it. So when you say, I'm a writer, I like to write, I write every day. Whether you write every day or not, your brain rewards you for that statement, I write every day. But when you get the reward before you do the thing, you're less likely to actually sit down and write. And so not talking to other people about it, not verbalizing about the story, about my writing, about all of that kind of stuff, would have helped me to write it faster, to complete it faster. Instead, I would have these long pauses. And as I reflect back on that time, those long pauses always followed me being very excited and telling all sorts of people about this novel that I was writing. And so that's just sort of a little brain hack that I think was a genuine mistake. It was something that I shouldn't have done. I should have kept it under my hat, and I should have just written the novel and then given it to people and then been excited about it and then, talked to people about it. And I think the last major mistake that I made was just not trusting myself, not trusting that I could tell a good story. I didn't believe that it was going to be any good. I really didn't. And then I wrote it and I gave it to a couple of readers and they were like, Seth, this is great. Now, obviously not, the next great American novel, but good. And it's taken me time, but over the years, this is a lesson that I've learned and internalized, and it has stood me in good stead, which is that I can write a good story. And it was true then, just as it's true now. And, I think the same is true about you. You can write a good story. You don't need people to tell you that it's good. You can just sit down and do it. You know how stories work. You know how to write. And so if you apply yourself, you put in the effort, you can write a good story. Allowing doubt and fear and all of that kind of stuff to creep in and just sort of gum up my writing process did me no good. It didn't help me. It didn't make me a better creative. In fact, it made me a much worse creative because I was constantly second guessing every decision that I was making. Trust yourself that you can write a good story. And even if it's not the greatest story of all time, or it's not even as good as you wish it was, that's okay. Because you can do it again, and you can do it again, and you can do it again. And eventually you will write a perfect story. You will. Through practice, through consistently applying yourself, you're going to write an incredible, incredible story. One of the things you hear all the time is your first story can't be any good. Listen, my first story has sold a ridiculous number of books, like an actual ridiculous number of books. And so to say that it's no good means that every single person who bought it and then went on to book 2 and book 3 and book 4 and book 5 and book 6, book 7, book 8, book 9, book 10, and the standalone, and has read the 8-book, second continuation series, it's to say that all of those people are wrong. And so when my heart tells me, man, Seth, you're not a very good writer, am I going to trust that? Or am I going to trust all of the people who have been excited to read my stories? The same, again, is true for you. You can write a great story too. So trust yourself. So anyway, those are some of the things I've been reflecting on as I've been thinking about mistakes I made early in my career. I would highly encourage you, don't try to define your story before you write it. Give yourself some wiggle room, because something unexpected and tremendous, something serendipitous might come from it. Don't spend your time talking to people about your story. Spend your time writing your story. And finally, trust yourself, because you can write a fantastic story. Hope you have an absolutely wonderful day, and I'll see you later.